Hey, I'm Dave,
And I'm Mike.
and we're the Nfgeeks.
That's right. And today we have a very special guest with us. You've known him as ENFJesus, but he's actually Dan. Dan is our ENFJ friend. And we brought him on today to talk about his experiences as an ENFJ, so that we can have an ENFJ video, a video devoted entirely to the ENFJ, but also to have a discussion between the three of us about how the ENFJ type exemplifies the basic NF traits and values. So welcome, Dan.
How's it going, Mike?
It's going good, Dan.
Good,
Good.
yeah.
You happy to be here?
Yeah.
All right. So Dan, when Dave and I did this, we asked questions of each of our type. So what questions do you want to ask us?
Well, the question I had is, what are the positive and negative aspects of an ENFJ which make them stand out among the other binary personality types? What makes an ENFJ an ENFJ and not an ENFP or an INFJ or an INTJ?
Okay, sure. Well, I'll start, Dave. I think one of the most positive types is the ENFJ's ability to communicate, and educate, even in a sense of being. And you're very good at this, Dan. The ability to communicate what needs to be done and how it needs to be done and why, and all of those things. I think ENFJs are great communicators and are able to communicate certain instructions or ideas in a very sort of constructed way. More than the ENFP. The ENFP is a little more all over the place. The ENFJ is much more focused in that construction of ideas that are being communicated to the group or communicated to other people. That's why ENFJs always make great teachers, for that matter. And the other ENFJs I know, because you're not the only ENFJ I know, Dan, they also can do that too, I find. Dave, what do you think?
They're very personable. They're very good at human interaction, I find. That they're good at coordinating social events and stuff of that matter, politically or social. And they're very good at getting people to do stuff, I find. They're very good motivators, and they can really, if you're feeling like you're stagnating on something that you have to do, you just have to talk to an ENFJ and they'll motivate you to do it. They're very good at that. Very good at pep talks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, certainly Dan has given me plenty of pep talks. That was the topic of one video.
Yeah.
That we had, one of your pep talks. Certainly. Another positive trait is funny, Dan, because I just have this experience of you, specifically you, is that ENFJs, for whatever reason, have a glow about them. They have some kind of, and that's a very NF thing to say, very sort of metaphorical thing to say. All the NFs get that. They're like, oh yeah, glow. The NTs are like, what is he, radiated? But ENFJs have a certain glow about them that does sort of allow them to shine in a way amongst other people. And so I want to tell you this, because this happened. The other day, you and I met for lunch at the university you attend. Do you remember? That's just like a week ago.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for you in the cafeteria of this university. It's not where I teach, it's a different location. And so I'm waiting there, and you'll find this amusing, Dave. I was standing there, and I noticed that I was basically in a giant cornfield of hipsters. Okay? Imagine a cornfield like in Iowa. Like you're in Iowa, and you're in these huge fields, but instead of corn, it's just hipsters. Hipster after hipster with the hoodies, and the wool hats, and the thin jeans, and it's just rows and rows and rows and rows of these kids. Now that's normal because those types of kids are at the school I teach too. But I realized, because this is a university, the huge number of hipsters that are there. Okay, and so I'm just sort of looking, and then all of a sudden you came in, walked into the room completely, different than everybody around. You did have this glow about you. You were there with your briefcase. Everyone has these bags, these crazy bags. You had your briefcase there, and you really sort of stood out amongst the whole crowd of people that were in there, in your way. And really, you weren't doing anything normal. You were actually just looking for me, in that time. But I really, it was almost like seeing a candle in the dark. Seriously, like a candle in the dark moving. It really like that. And it hit me for a moment as you walked in the door, these glass doors, and then we saw each other, and then we were just talking about whatever we were talking about. But for a brief moment, there was that glow of separateness and specialness that ENFJs have sometimes was very present.
Mhm.
Anything else, Dave? What else?
I think we've talked about this before. The look in their eyes.
Oh
It's
yeah,
very,
let's go ahead, Dan. Show them your eyes. Look at that, the ENFJ. Look at those.
that.
It's like laser beams.
Whereas the ENFP has a twinkle in their eye like Santa Claus.
Right.
You have a very, very, very gaze.
Yeah, a
strong
gaze.
gaze.
Yes, a strong gaze, no matter what.
And I find that synonymous with ENFJ. Even the female ENFJ I know, she has a very, very strong gaze.
Yeah, that's also true of other ENFJs I know, and I dated an ENFJ once, believe it or not, Dan. And she also had the gaze. She had it too. That's one of the first things I noticed about her.
Yeah.
As well. All right, so for negatives, all right, for negative things about ENFJs, well, let's see. Well, one, Dan, I guess this could be a positive. It depends on what end you're on it. But ENFJs don't take no for an answer. that seems to be a commonality. I don't know if you could deny that. I don't have anything to say about that. But ENFJs do not take no for an answer very well. That seems to be a common thing amongst you, for starters. I'll start with that. Certainly, I would say that ENFJs also have, a certain sense of self that the other types don't have, and sometimes it manifests itself as a self-confidence, and Dan, sometimes your fellow ENFJs manifest in megalomania. We talked about how Hitler, and you and I have talked about this too. Hitler was probably an ENFJ, and has a lot of ENFJ qualities. Laid out Nazism very easily. Got all excited at the Nuremberg rallies, and what do you think, Dave?
Negatives.
Negatives.
One negative I would come to, and this could be positive and negative as well, it would be that they're kind of excitable. They're very excitable. But that could be a good thing. I mean, it goes with the whole motivation thing. You can, if you get excited about something like an idea or a topic, then that makes it even more interesting for conversation. But sometimes it's just like speaking from an I perspective, an INFJ specifically, it's just like sometimes you don't want to deal with excited people, and sometimes the excitable people give you a little bit too much. But it happens. It's just being an I. I pet peeve.
Well, what do you think, Dan, of this feedback? How is this resonating with you? Do you find that these are accurate interpretations of ENFJs?
Yeah.
Do you see yourself in some of these?
Yeah, yes, I can see myself in many of them. Yes, actually, pretty much all of them. And I do find like most of the negative and the positive are accurate with the ones you pointed out. Especially when it comes to talking with people, trying to convince them of things. I mean, it is very hard to accept no as an answer when trying to convince somebody to come to an event or do something. Do something that isn't just the typical daily routine. Get up, go to class, go back to your dorm, do random stuff. I mean, trying to get people to come to events, that type of stuff. It's definitely something that you have to work at. And even if, let's say, initially they say, "Oh no, I don't want to do it," sometimes if you work on them and actually get them quite enthusiastic about it and get them involved in it. And that's what I find is that there's a certain level where you can, if they are saying no, you can try and get them to do it. But eventually, there comes a point where there's no moving, there's no budging them, there's no moving them to come to the event, and that's when you say, okay, I'm not going to do it, and then you stop trying to convince them. But there's always that level where sometimes they don't know what it is, sometimes they're a little bit concerned, it's a new experience, and you sometimes have to explain to them that this isn't going to be like an invasion of DA or something like that. Just come to a student meeting or a student event or something like that.
Then it's another thing. ENFJs often find themselves in leadership positions in organizing events, and you do a lot of things like that as well. All right. Well, Dan, let's. Dave and I are going to ask you now. How do you feel you, as an ENFJ, manifest some of the core values that all the NFs share? So all the NFs share some core values, and we've talked about some of these before. So, for example, I'm interested in your intuition. Because I've had some very bizarre incidences with you and your intuition, to be
yeah.
honest. How do you feel that your intuition manifests itself in your life?
I think it manifests itself in my life. I think in relations with other people, and sometimes I can think that someone isn't necessarily being genuine, or 100% telling the truth, or even is looking at you seriously. When you're going around, talking with people, trying to convince people to do things, and you're just representing an organization or something like that. You talk with lots of people, and you talk with some people, they immediately just say no. Some people like to make up excuses, things like that. And just the different interactions you have are really interesting. Is that you can tell when I feel when somebody's being genuine, but then when they're not being genuine. And that's how I feel about my intuition. And I think that's where it comes out the most.
Well, Dan, one of our fans, Goodwitch, right? That's right, Goodwitch, one of our fans, I think pointed out that when ENFJs know something, they know something. They just know. That even if they haven't been told things, when they know something, they know absolutely. Have you ever had experiences like that with people?
With people, or is there anything in particular?
I think they were talking about people, like they intuitively know things about people, but it could be beyond people. You could expand it.
I have that with people, yes, and I intuitively know maybe this person isn't necessarily.
Can you give an example, like a specific example? Anything comes to mind?
I can't think of a specific human interaction. Really, but I experienced that. I can't remember anything really. It's like one of those things where it happens daily, things like that. I don't actually think, okay, I'm going to remember this now as an example. No. But I do feel that when we're just talking about different ideas and, different, let's say an idea to try and mobilize people, an idea to just do something, I can, my intuition tells me, okay, is this actually going to work? Is this, will this actually work in our world and things like that? And this doesn't necessarily mean our world is more like, does it fit into my ideal world more? But that's what I experience, with my intuition.
Has your intuition ever told you to interact with somebody, say if they were down or something, to call them and cheer them up?
Yes, actually, I have done that multiple times. Especially if people I know, I feel like they might be feeling the best. Like they said something odd to call them. I don't think they're feeling good because the tone of their voice and things like that. And I'll call them up. Or
do you think God tells you to do that?
No.
No. Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay, because I'm not so sure. Just say it.
But definitely though, sometimes I'll just be on campus. I'll just I see somebody. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna walk up to them. And so I start talking to them, and I find out that they're actually really interesting and really involved on campus. It's just one of those things where I don't do know all the time, but it's happened in several instances where I'm like, okay, this person, I don't know why, but they would talk to them, and they end up being someone who's really involved, really interested in all the student organizations and things like that I'm interested in. I'm not necessarily interested in every student organization, but and it ends up making a contact and making somebody who I can work with in the future.